My name is Hannah Clark, and for most of my life I believed that silence was the easiest way to live. I grew up on Maple Harbor Road in Briston, Ohio, a small American town where the houses looked almost the same and the days felt slow but safe. Our home was an old white two-story house with a wide front porch and a yard that my father, Mark Clark, tried his best to take care of. My mother, Evelyn, liked to keep the curtains closed during the day, saying the sunlight made the furniture fade, so the inside of the house always felt a little dim. I used to think it was peaceful. Later, I realized it was the kind of dimness that makes it hard to see real problems. My parents always assumed I was living paycheck to paycheck at my office job. They believed I was struggling the same way they did when they were young, but they never asked me much about it. They never asked if I had dreams or plans or even if I needed help. They simply believed their version of my life, and I let them. I kept my real world quiet, hidden behind my closed bedroom door and the hum of my laptop screen late at night. The truth was completely different. I had built a small online business on my own, one that grew faster than I could have imagined. It started as a hobby, something I worked on after my long days at the office. Slowly, it turned into something real, something strong, something profitable. Before long, I was earning around $50,000 every month, and even though I could hardly believe it myself, the numbers never lied. I watched my accounts grow while people around me believed I could barely afford gas for my car. I didn't hide it out of shame and not out of fear. I hid it because I liked the peace. I liked the freedom. I liked knowing that my success belonged to me alone, untouched by other people's opinions. I also knew my parents would react strangely, maybe with disbelief, maybe with jealousy, or maybe with the kind of pride that feels more like ownership. I didn't want any of that. I wanted quiet. I wanted to choose how I lived. Still, even with all the distance between us, I wanted to help them. I knew they were always worried about money. I knew the bills made my mother anxious, and I knew my father sometimes pretended a small paycheck was larger than it really was. So, every month, without a word, I sent them $10,000. I never told them it was from me. I thought it would help them breathe easier. I thought maybe they would feel supported, even if they didn't know by whom. In a way, I wanted them to feel loved, because despite everything, I still loved them. I told myself it was fine, that the truth didn't matter as long as they were okay. But the problem with hiding things is that people start making decisions without understanding what they're touching. My parents began to think I was nothing but an extra expense for them, someone who lived under their roof without giving anything back. And because I never corrected them, they started to believe their own story more than reality. One quiet Sunday morning, they called me into the kitchen. The room smelled like burnt toast, and the sunlight coming through the window hit the table in a pale yellow stripe. They both sat there, waiting. My father had his hands folded, and my mother avoided my eyes. I already felt something strange, like the air was too tight. "Hannah," my father said, clearing his throat, "we need to talk." I sat down slowly, wondering if something was wrong. Maybe they had finally found out about the deposits. Maybe they wanted to thank me. Maybe they needed more help. My mind raced through possibilities, but I didn't expect what actually came. My mother sighed and looked at me with the same tired expression she used when she talked about bills. "We can't keep doing this," she said. "We can't afford to keep supporting you. You're old enough now. You need to move out." Her words felt heavy, like stones thrown across a frozen lake. Cold. Hard. Loud. My father nodded, looking strangely relieved, as if they had been waiting a long time to say it. "You're an adult," he added. "It's time you take care of yourself." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at them. They had no idea what they were saying. They didn't know they were talking to the person who had been quietly paying a huge part of their bills for months. They didn't know they were pushing away the very source of their comfort. All they knew was the story they built in their own minds, that I was a burden. I wanted to tell them everything right there. I wanted to say, "I'm the one who has been giving you $10,000 every month." I wanted to say, "You don't know me at all." But the words didn't come. I realized then that even if I explained it, even if they apologized, the pain of their assumption would stay. They had made a choice without even trying to understand me. So instead, I nodded. I even smiled a little, though it felt like something inside me cracked. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll go." They seemed relieved, almost proud of themselves, as if they had just made some responsible decision. They didn't understand they were breaking something they couldn't fix. I went back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. The walls around me suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like they were squeezing me out. My laptop sat on the desk, the same laptop that had built my freedom, the same one that had been the gateway to the life they never took the time to ask about. I looked at it and realized something. Maybe this was the chance I needed. If they didn't want me there, then I didn't need to be there. I already had the money. I already had the future. I didn't need their permission. So I packed my things slowly, quietly, folding my clothes and stacking my notebooks, placing my laptop in its case like I was sealing the truth inside it. By the time I zipped my final bag, something inside me had changed. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. Done with hiding. Done with pretending. Done with waiting for my parents to see me. I stepped out of the house hours later, carrying my bags into the soft evening air, and I didn't look back. Not once. When I left my parents' house that evening, I didn't know exactly where I would go, only that I would never return to that version of myself again. The air outside felt cooler than usual, almost sharp against my skin, as if the world itself was reminding me that this was the beginning of something new. I got into my car and drove away from Maple Harbor Road, watching the familiar houses blur behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt strangely calm, like a weight had been lifted off my chest, one I never realized I had been carrying for years. Over the next week, I searched quietly for a new home. I wanted a fresh place, somewhere untouched by old memories. I didn't want to stay in Ohio, not even in the same area. I needed distance, space, and silence. After a few days of searching online, I found a house in Redmont, Colorado, a small but bright city surrounded by wide skies and warm hills. The pictures showed a soft blue home with white doors, sitting proudly on a gentle hill with a view of the whole city below. Something about it made my heart settle. It looked like the kind of place where a person could breathe again. Without hesitating, I bought it outright for $480,000. I didn't even flinch when I pressed the final button to send the payment. I had earned every dollar. I had built my life on my own. If anything, it felt like I was finally giving myself what I deserved. The day I arrived in Redmont, the sky was a bright, clean blue. The air smelled different, lighter, warmer, full of pine and sun. As I unlocked the door to my new house, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Real freedom, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Inside, the house was empty, but full of possibilities. I walked through the room slowly, touching the walls, imagining where everything would go. The living room had 2 large windows that let in more sunlight than I was used to. My parents' house had always been dim, but this place felt alive. The floors were a warm honey-colored wood, smooth under my feet. The kitchen had a long counter, perfect for late-night snacks and early morning coffee. Upstairs, the bedrooms were simple but inviting, waiting for soft blankets, warm lights, and quiet nights. I spent the first few days buying furniture, decorating, and building the home I always dreamed of. I chose soft rugs, pale colors, and gentle lamps. I put string lights around the office window and a large white desk in the center of the room. It felt like a little world created just for me. The best part was knowing I didn't have to rush. I worked online for only a few hours a day and still made more money each month than I knew what to do with. I no longer needed my old office job, so I officially quit. The email was short and polite. When my old boss replied, pretending to sound disappointed, I almost laughed. He had never appreciated me anyway. I didn't explain anything to my parents, not where I moved, not how I bought the house, not how well I was doing. They hadn't asked if I was okay when they told me to leave. They hadn't asked about my dreams or plans. All they cared about was saving money, so I stopped sending them the $10,000 every month. It wasn't out of revenge. It was simply because they no longer deserved it. With time, my new life began to take shape. Every morning, I woke up to golden sunlight pouring through the wide windows, warming the floor of my bedroom. I made coffee in my quiet kitchen and sat on my balcony, my own balcony, watching Redmont wake up. I would see cars moving slowly down the streets, joggers passing by, neighbors walking their dogs. I didn't know any of them yet, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lonely. I felt peaceful. In the afternoons, I worked from my home office. The soft click of my keyboard became a kind of music to me. My business kept growing, steady and strong, and I only needed to work a few hours to maintain it. The rest of the day was mine to spend however I wanted. Sometimes I walked around the city, exploring little shops, bookstores, and quiet cafes. Other times I stayed home, watching the sky change colors as evening settled over the hills. Not long after I settled in, my closest friend, Grace Linton, flew from Amersfoort, England to visit me. Grace and I had met years ago through an online forum about small businesses. She was smart, funny, and full of life. She loved traveling across Europe, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, and she always brought back stories filled with warm places, long roads, and kind strangers. Whenever she spoke about her adventures, her eyes lit up like candles. When she arrived in Redmont, she hugged me so tightly I almost lost my breath. "Hannah, this place is beautiful," she said the moment she saw my house. "It looks like a storybook home." I smiled. It did feel like a storybook to me. A story I was finally writing for myself. Grace stayed for a few days, and we spent them laughing, drinking coffee on the balcony, and exploring Colorado together. She asked me how I'd been, how things were with my family, how I managed to buy a house so quickly. But I didn't tell her everything. I didn't tell her the real reason I left. I didn't tell her about the $10,000 I had sent each month, or how my parents pushed me out because they thought I was a burden. The truth felt heavy, and saying it out loud would have made it real again. I wanted distance, not reminders. Instead, I told her I needed a fresh start, and that part was true. One night, we sat in my living room with soft music playing in the background. Grace was curled up on the couch with a blanket, and I sat on the floor with a cup of warm tea. She looked at me carefully, her voice gentle. "You look different," she said. "Calmer. Like you finally let go of something that was hurting you." I looked around the room, the glowing lights, the soft rugs, the open space I had created with my own hands. I took a slow breath before answering. "I think I did," I said. "I think I finally let myself live." And for the first time, I believed it. 2 months passed quietly after I moved to Redmont. My life fell into a calm rhythm: morning coffee on the balcony, afternoon work in my bright home office, peaceful walks in the evening when the sky turned orange over the hills. I didn't speak to my parents during that time, not even through short messages. At first, it felt strange. I had grown up in a house where silence was normal, but distance was not. Still, this distance felt healthier than anything I had ever experienced with them. I knew they had noticed I moved out, but I didn't think they cared enough to wonder where I went. I assumed they believed I had simply taken their advice and found a cheaper apartment somewhere. I assumed they believed I was still struggling financially, still living paycheck to paycheck. And perhaps they preferred thinking that way. It fit the story they created about me. They didn't know that I had removed myself from their world completely. I thought that would be the end of things. Then, one quiet Wednesday morning, everything changed. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was early, the sun barely rising over Redmont. I checked the caller ID. It was the bank. For a moment, I felt confused. My own accounts were perfect. My payments always came through. I never missed anything. But when I answered the call, the woman on the line explained that someone had been trying to trace the origins of monthly deposits made into my parents' account, deposits that suddenly stopped 2 months earlier. So they finally noticed, I whispered to myself after the call ended. It had taken them almost 8 weeks to realize that the money was gone. 8 weeks to look at their statements and ask the simplest question: where was this $10,000 coming from every month? I could picture the moment they discovered it. My father standing at the kitchen counter with his reading glasses halfway down his nose. My mother sitting with a calculator, thinking something was wrong with the bank. Maybe they called the institution angrily, demanding answers. Maybe they argued, confused, unable to understand why the mystery support had come to an end. And then the truth hit them. They must have gone through every deposit one by one until they realized every transfer came from me, from their daughter they pushed out to save money. The thought didn't make me angry. It made me tired in the kind of deep way that settles in your bones. They had never asked about me, never asked how I was doing, never asked if I needed anything. But now that they realized how much I had done for them, suddenly their world was shaking. 2 hours later, around midday, I heard a knock at my front door. I froze. No one ever came without telling me. I lived far from Ohio, far from anyone who knew my day-to-day life. So, naturally, I felt my heart jump. I walked to the door slowly, my hands tense at my sides. When I opened it, the sight in front of me felt like a dream and a nightmare wrapped together. My parents were standing on my doorstep. My father looked smaller than I remembered, as if stress had taken pieces of him away. My mother's eyes were red, either from crying or from hours of panicked thinking. They stared at my house first, the white porch, the clean windows, the peaceful yard. I knew they were shocked. It didn't match the image they had in their minds of the daughter they thought was helpless. "Hannah," my mother said first. Her voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell us?" My father stepped forward, his voice softer than I had ever heard. "We didn't know any of this. We didn't know the money was from you. We thought—" I cut him off. "You thought I was a burden." Silence wrapped around us. The kind of silence that feels like a wall. My mother shook her head quickly. "No, we didn't mean it that way. We were under pressure. The bills were piling up, and we didn't understand what was going on. If we had known—" "That's the problem," I said. "You never asked. You never tried to know." My father looked at the porch floor, unable to meet my eyes. My mother began crying softly, holding her hands together like she was praying for something she already lost. "We're sorry," she whispered. "Please forgive us, Hannah. Please." Their apologies felt heavy and late, like patching a broken window with thin tape. You can cover the crack, but the glass will never be whole again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked at them with a calmness that surprised even me. "You asked me to leave," I said. "You believed I was costing you money. You didn't even think to talk to me first. I was sending you thousands of dollars every month out of love, and you pushed me away as if I meant nothing." My father stepped forward again, his hands trembling slightly. "We made a mistake, Hannah. A terrible mistake. We should have asked you. We should have trusted you. We should have. You should have cared." I finished quietly. My parents cried then, both of them. I had never seen my father cry in my entire life. I stood there, watching the people who raised me break down on the porch of the house I bought without their knowledge. But I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge. I felt empty. I knew they didn't love me in the way a parent is supposed to. Their love was thin, conditional, tied to comfort and assumptions. It wasn't the kind of love that sees you, hears you, or supports you. It was the kind that disappears the moment you stop fitting their idea of who you should be. After a long silence, I spoke again. "You didn't want to support me, but you were happy to take my money. That says everything." My mother tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. "I'm not coming home," I said. "And I'm not giving money anymore. I'm building my life now." They stared at me with a grief deeper than words. I didn't add anything else. I simply stepped inside and closed the door gently. Not angrily, not loudly, just firmly. When the latch clicked, I leaned against the door and breathed out slowly. It was over. Everything I had been holding inside for years had finally been spoken. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my brother, Liam, the only person in my family who ever loved me without conditions, even in his own broken way. "I heard what happened. I'm coming by. I need to see you." And for the first time that day, I felt something warm in my chest. Liam still cared. He always had. Liam arrived the same evening my parents showed up at my door. I had barely finished wiping away the last tears that refused to fall when the knock came. 3 slow taps, the way he always did it when we were kids, so I would know it was him. I opened the door, And there he stood, looking older than I remembered, with tired blue eyes and a light tremor in his hands. He wasn't drunk this time. I could smell nothing on him except cold air and the faint scent of the road. He stepped inside quietly, almost afraid to take up space. I closed the door behind him, and for a moment we just looked at each other. There were 1,000 things I could have said, but none of them seemed right. So I waited. Liam, as always, spoke first. "Mom and Dad told me what happened," he said, lowering himself onto my sofa. His hands shook as he clasped them together. "I didn't know. I swear, Hannah, I didn't know what they were doing." I sat beside him, not too close, but close enough for him to know I wasn't angry at him. "I know," I said softly. "This wasn't on you." He nodded, staring at the floor as if the answers were hidden in the wooden grain. "They're a mess right now," he murmured. "They're scared. They didn't expect you to be this." He lifted his eyes and looked around my living room. The soft lights, the warm blankets, the clean white walls, it all reflected the life I built. A life far from the one they imagined for me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The look on Liam's face told me he understood. He leaned back on the sofa, letting out a long breath. "I should have stood up for you," he said suddenly. "All those years. I should have done more." His voice cracked, and I felt my heart tighten. My brother had always been caught in his own storms, trapped between guilt and escape. His drinking had taken pieces of him, little by little, in ways I could never fully understand. But even on his worst days, he had never treated me like a burden. "Liam," I said gently, "you were fighting your own battles." He shook his head. "Still, you were the only good thing in that house most days. You were the only one who saw me as more than a screw-up." He swallowed hard. "And I let you walk through all that pain alone." I reached for his hand this time, and he didn't pull away. His hands were cold, rough from work, and trembling slightly, the kind of trembling that came from years of trying to stay standing when life kept knocking him down. "You were the one who believed in me," I said, "even when no one else did." He looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "Because you're strong, Hannah. You always were. Even when you didn't know it." A small, sad smile crossed his face. "I told Mom and Dad that they didn't deserve the money you gave them. I told them they didn't deserve you at all." I didn't expect that. My chest tightened, not with hurt, but with a strange warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "What did they say?" "They cried," he said. "They begged me to talk to you. They think if I ask you to forgive them, you will." I lowered my eyes. "And what do you think?" Liam hesitated. "I think you owe them nothing. Not after what they did." His words were simple, but they struck deep. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them to suffer. I just didn't want to carry the weight they placed on my shoulders anymore. He stayed with me for a while, telling me about his attempts to cut down on drinking, about his struggles with work, and about the nights he slept in his truck because the house felt too heavy with old memories. I listened to every word, not out of duty, but out of love. Liam had always been human in the rawest, most painful way. He didn't hide behind pride or excuses. He let himself be flawed. And somehow, that made him the most sincere person I had. Later that night, we sat on the balcony, watching the city lights scatter across Redmont like tiny stars fallen to the ground. The air was cool, and the wind brushed through the trees with quiet whispers. "This place suits you," Liam said. "You look alive." I smiled. "I feel alive." He nodded slowly. "You're going to do great things, Hannah. I always knew you would." Those were the same words he used to tell me when we were teenagers, sitting on the old roof of our parents' house, staring at the streetlights below. Back then, he was usually drunk, but his words were always clear. This time, they felt like truth. We stayed outside for a long time, talking about the future, his, mine, the world ahead of us. He told me he wanted to get help, real help, not the kind he tried for a week and then gave up on. He said he wanted to get better for himself, but also for me. "I don't want you to be ashamed of me," he said. I squeezed his arm gently. "I've never been ashamed of you. Not once." He looked away, blinking hard. "Thanks, sis." When he finally left that night, I stood by the door for a long time after he walked down the steps. His shoulders seemed straighter, his steps more sure, as if coming to see me had given him something he didn't know he needed. When I closed the door behind him, the house felt warm again, not lonely, not heavy, but safe. It hit me then that forgiveness didn't always belong to the people who asked for it the loudest. Sometimes it belonged to the ones who were hurting quietly, trying their best in the only ways they knew how. I didn't forgive my parents that night. I didn't know if I ever would. But I forgave Liam for everything he had been through, for every mistake, for every night the world seemed too heavy for him. And in that forgiveness, I found a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. As I stood in the center of my living room, looking at the soft lights and the space I created with my own hands, I understood something clearly. I had built this life. I had saved myself. I had walked through fire alone and come out stronger. I was Hannah Clark, a woman of my own making, a woman who would never again shrink herself to fit someone else's idea of who she should be. And for the first time, I felt ready for everything still waiting ahead of me.